As I showed you before, the pencil, to pencil a skirt, a lot of people use different calculations. Some people will tell you that you should measure around your knee, how it's comfortable, with one leg slightly in front of the other, and measure around to see how comfortable it will be, so that you will know how much of it you will reduce. But what to pencil a skirt, the easiest method is to measure 1 inch. Well, I just want to mark the hip line. So to measure 1 inch to 1.5 inch on the side seam. So you measure in 1 inch to 1.5 inch on the side seam, and then you connect to the hip line. The same thing you do to the back. And there, you just redraw your and add seam allowances. I'm always sure to mark my hip line. So now this here is my pencil skirt. This pencil skirt block. So you add your seam allowances. You do the same thing you did for the front at the back. Just take it in by 1.5 inches, 1 inch to 1.5 inches, depending on how pencil you want it to go. So the next thing we're going to do right now is the flared skirt. Let me cut this out. You just add your So now the A-line skirt. To get your A-line skirt, what you do is that your A-line can start from anywhere. Your A-line can start from anywhere. It can start from your hip. It can start from above the hip. It can even start from the waist. So your A-line can start from anywhere. And remember, whatever you do to the front, you also do to the back block. So I'm just going to secure this. Your A-line, you can decide to start your A-line from here as wide as you want. This is the hip line. can decide that you want your A-line to start from your hip and measure how wide you like it to be at the base. Your A-line can start from the hip line. It can start from above the hip line. Your A-line can actually also start from your waist, your waistline. Right? In creating your A-line shape, so that you do not have a situation where your length, the length at the base, the length on the sides differ, what you do is you measure, you take the measurement of your straight line here and measure it on your side seam. Once you do that, you join it. So now you have the same length on both sides. So you can see your A-line can start from anywhere. It can start from the hip, it can start from above the hip, and it can even start from your waistline. Just ensure that when it's starting from your waistline, by the time it gets to the hip area, make sure that the width is wider than the width of your hip. For example, you cannot take from your A here to touch your hip, because it will be cutting off all this, and then your skirt will not fit any longer. So it always has to go wider. So now this here is my skirt, my flared skirt. So the same thing I did here at the back, I'll do at the front. What I do is that I measure the distance. When I determine, I measure how much more do I want to add, measure the distance here, and then draw my line, measure to be sure that the base of your skirt will be parallel to each other. So here we have the A-line. We're going to go ahead and do the flared skirt. Right, there are two methods of doing the flared skirt depending on how much of a flare you want to get. One, you can do it by just drawing lines. The easiest one is just from that point, you draw lines, parallel lines down from the dot point. Then, like you will do in that manipulation, you just cut up the line you drew to the dot point, not through it, please, to the dot point, and close. And close the dot. Don't worry if you have only one dot, it doesn't matter. This block was drafted with 2 dots. close the darts. So now we have a flared skirt block. This is the center back. So you do exactly the same thing. So what I do now is just to smooth out my lines, retrace my block, and smooth. Another way of creating the flare, to get more flare out of your skirt, if you want like a really flared skirt, is, I'm going to use the same one that we flared earlier, is to create more lines to open out. So I'm going to add more lines that will go straight to the waistline. To add more space. So this is called the slash and the spread method. It's called slash and spread. I'm sure it's a common technique used on every part of the bodies. It's used to add fullness. And it's also very good for use in draping. So I'm going to slash it to the waistline to add more fullness. I can also decide that I want to continue the slash here, so that I can have like a really full flared skirt. So I'm going to continue here. Then I spread it out very evenly. One important thing to note is that your center front line, you draw a perpendicular line and place your center front on the line. Just going to secure it down. So I've drawn a perpendicular line and I've placed my center. Okay, this is my center back. If it's the center front, just place your center line on it, and then you spread out to get the fullness. You spread out equally. Spread out your slashed lines equally. You can decide how full you want it to be. For example, if I want to add an extra, I can decide to add an extra 2 inches on each of my, or more. Well, this is a small pattern. This is a half scale, so I'll add 2 inches along every panel. Okay, now we're going to do the panel skirt. A little note about the panel skirt. To do a panel skirt, you must first of all determine how many panels you want. We're going to do a straight panel skirt. We're not going to add any gauze. We're not going to add any flares to our panel. Just going to create the panel skirt, so no fancy add-ons. A panel skirt is what it says it is. It's different pieces, is what we call the pieces skirt, right? But what we're going to do, the one we're going to do right now, is just to give you the basics, the one without the gauze. In the intermediate course, we'll treat gauze, we'll treat the panel lines with flares, we'll treat different types of skirts, we'll treat skirt designs, both the symmetrical and asymmetrical. But here, in the panel skirt, you have to first of all decide how many panels you would like. In creating the panel skirt, you decide on the number of panels that you want. So in this case, I want a 6-panel skirt, meaning I'll have 3 panels in front and 3 panels behind. And to do this, I have to divide my front panel by 3 so that I can have 3 parts. The middle part is going to be put on fold, and then I will have the two sides of the front and the back bodies, skirt block. So to get the to be able to divide this equally, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to measure skirt. I have to take the measurement of the whole skirt, including the darts. And here I have 12.5. And you know that I cannot divide this half skirt block into 2. If not, it's like I'm getting 4 panels, or I'll have 2 panels at the same size, and the center panel will be twice as big as the rest. So what I do is that I divide this into 3, right? So I do 2/3. So I'm going to do 2/3 of 12.5, and to get 2/3 of 12.5 is about 8.3 centimeters. So from the side seam, I measure 8.3 centimeters, and that's where I am. I do 2/3 of the bottom part too. And then I draw a straight line. To the bottom. But remember that we still have the darts that we have not addressed here. So what you do is that you share the darts on the both sides of the panel line. So this together, my darts are 2 centimeters. So I'm going to take 1 centimeter on each side and connect it to the end. I measure the length of the dart and draw it. Just going to mark a notch there, mark one on the hip line. So in the same vein, if you want 4 panels, you can decide that your center front will not be on fold. That means you're going to cut this into 2. And if you're going to do that, that means you have to divide this side equally. Divide this side equally so that you can have 4 different equal panels. So this is just one way of doing it. The other ways of doing it you will learn in the intermediate class. So what you just do now is to cut out each panel, separate the panels, add seam allowances, and sew. You see? So I've cut out the darts. You can decide to pencil your skirt before you panel it, whatever your design is, however you wish. So this here is our panel, this front side. Front side is a center front of a 6-panel, because this one will be 6-panel skirt. The center front you will need to cut on fold. So that is it for our basic skirt tutorial for this basic class. We'll learn other skirts and other variations, many other variations in the intermediate class or in the intermediate course. We have now come to the end of our basic pattern drafting course. Next month we'll start on the intermediate pattern drafting course, where we start to go in depth into the designing of patterns, using all the techniques that we have learnt in this basic course and adding and building on them and adding more and more and more. You know, there's always something new coming up, but the techniques are basically the same when you come to think about it. It's just that the interpretations are a little different. If you enjoyed this course, please recommend it to people who you think might need it. The more people who understand pattern drafting, the better, as far as I'm concerned. It will be easier for you to create your own designs instead of constantly copying other people's designs, if you understand the principles in pattern drafting. I hope you decide to take the intermediate course, and I hope you also tell people about this course, and you keep on practicing and keep on improving. Once again, my name is Mecca. Thank you very much. Keep designing, keep improving, keep learning. Bye.